Hi, I'm Tim May, and I'm moderating this series of 10 conversations on expressive photography with Phil Douglis. Phil understands the nature of expressive photography as well as anyone I know. For 35 years, he directed the Douglis Visual Workshops, and he helped more than 10,000 communications professionals make and use photographs to express ideas, tell stories, and convey meaning. Phil says he's learned a great deal from those workshop participants over the years, and he also enjoys learning from the tens of thousands of images he's made in more than 60 countries. I first met Phil at Santa Fe Workshops in 2004, and we went on to photograph together across North America, as well as in Europe, Asia, Africa, and South America. Both Phil and I have displayed our images on various photographic websites, and Phil has put together a 5,000 image cyberbook on expressive photography at pbase.com. You can find the link to that cyberbook in the notes below. It has drawn more than 10 million visitors since he started in 2003. They have left more than 12,000 comments under his pictures, and Phil has answered each one of them. When the pandemic brought Zoom into our lives, I asked Phil to bring that cyberbook to life in this set of 10 conversations on expressive photography, and now he has. Enjoy.
Human values are the third leg, I call it a leg or pillar of expressive photography. The other two we covered in different modules. We covered abstraction, which is essentially removing information to leave the most important information in the picture, to take out all distractions, to simplify and emphasize. And the second pillar of expressive photography is incongruity, and that's when you have an unusual relationship, not something you would normally see. Something has been changed. That confounds our expectations and draws us in and conveys meaning. Human values is probably the most important, because if we don't have human values in our picture, we can't really relate to them. They're exercises in technical photography or mechanical information, but it has to be rooted in a human story. And let's begin to look at pictures and see how human values come through images. With this image, which I made in Normandy on about 10 or 15 years ago now, it was a gray afternoon, and the cemetery, the U.S. cemetery was fairly empty of visitors. There were, as we say, the quick and the dead. Here we have rows and rows and rows of graves and a man maintaining the grass. I call this image at ease because he is the person who keeps this place as it should be, in memory, in respect. He maintains the integrity of the place. And I don't know if he himself even understands how important he is and how important his job is and what it really represents. And I caught him as he reached the end of the row. The end of the row. It is an image that is very rich in human values, such as respect, such as memorialization, such as the toll of war. All these things come through. And these are all values that human beings can relate to, and they should be in our pictures. This image here, Tim, you and I were in Pingyao, China, remember? And I saw this fellow fixing a light. I mean, it's a very simple image. It's a very simple subject, but it's so rich in human values. If you look at his hands, how he seems as if he's playing a musical instrument. They're so eloquent. And eloquence is certainly a human value. Look at the nail he has in his mouth. I mean, he's organized. He's ready to pound the next one after he fixes this one. And you see the beauty of the scene, the way the rows of electric fixtures are aligned, and the ornate lettering of the sign painted gold. These represent human values. People took the time and applied the art and the skill to make it beautiful. And beauty is a human value. It probably is one of the supreme human values.
And also, both of these images bring to mind, by the way, as I've said before, I really love this image.
I know.
But it's work. And I know that you have, I believe you have on your P-Base galleries one on work, but both of these, and work is a human value.
Very much so.
And, you know, maintenance and keeping things going. Both of those images deal with that.
And other images in this module do deal with work as well, because most people spend about half their lives working.
Right.
And we all understand what work is, what it means, how it feels, and what no work means.
Right.
In these days of pandemic. This is also a work picture. I made this in Guilin, China, and it's a woman at work as a laborer, as you know, shoveling debris, excavating rubble, moving rubble, and she's taking a break for a moment. And I caught her as she rested, and taking a break or rest, pause, thought. All these things are human values, and they come through in this image. And notice that she has her back to the men who are doing nothing but chatting. Women do the work here, the heavy lifting.
Mm-hmm.
And that too is a human value. There is a very sexist thread here, because this is the way the society runs. They can pay women less, apparently. And so they're assigned the dirtiest job, at least in Guilin at this time. I don't know how this was many years ago. I made it in black and white, and throughout these modules, I discuss why I change from the normal colors. I make all my images in color, but this one needed to be black and white because she was wearing an almost chartreuse sweater. And it would have been jarring. It would have changed the meaning of the picture. It would have been less about the rubble and more about the way she looked. And maybe to some that would have increased the meaning, because perhaps that chartreuse sweater was her way of saying, I am me, I'll wear what I want, even in the dirtiest job. But I thought that I compared the two. And to me, to take away the color and neutralize it, you concentrate on the work at hand and the feelings in the picture and the juxtaposition of the woman laborer and the men who are paying no attention to her and apparently are doing no work whatsoever.
Move your cursor. The thing that hits me is, again, this idea of when anybody is viewing your images, they come with their collection of experiences. And I was interested a lot in China many years ago, my younger days. And I remember back in the Maoist time, there was a big push for what they called women hold up half the sky.
Right.
And it was a push for women's rights to some degree, but also here's the woman's holding up the work, more than half the sky.
Right, and I'm sure some people are thinking about the the Chinese government's policy on you can't, they frowned upon people giving birth to women.
Right.
I think that's changed now, but I made this image in the Grand Place in Brussels, Belgium. And the group of kids were celebrating some activity. I don't know who they were. We do see some international flags here. And we see what looks like a bottle of liquor stenciled on the back of all the shirts. But my reason for making this picture was based solely on the human values involved. This is exuberance, it's happy, it's joyful, it's triumphant. All these things are human values. It's that moment when they reach for the sky. And I love the little the woman climbing this man's back here.
Right.
And her shirt is coming up as she does so. And she's unaware of it, but the world sees what she doesn't. We were in Rio de Janeiro, and we were touring the favelas, and the favelas are, as we would call them in our society, slums.
It isn't you and I. It's another we.
That's right.
Okay, go ahead.
That's right. It's and they were, and I don't know if they still are, very dangerous places. We had to have special permission to get in there. We had to have a guide with us at all times. These places are run by locals who are not exactly law-abiding, and it was a very depressing but insightful visit. And when we finished, I stood on a end of a street up there that overlooked the edges of the favela. And it was where they threw their garbage. They just dumped the garbage there. And I waited until a figure approached and walked up past the garbage. He doesn't even look at it because he's used to it. And what this image talks about is impoverishment. It talks about avoidance. He's wearing blinders. He doesn't really want to face what he sees every day. He has accepted it as part of his life. And we in our society would have difficulty doing that. And that was my point in making the photograph. It's rooted in human values. Do you have any observation, Tim, on this one?
Well, aside from just looking at the graphics of it, with the three levels, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm interested, as we've talked about your pillars over the years, I have found myself feeling the most ambiguous about human values. And I think part of the reason is the use of the word values, because values sort of indicate to me valuable elements of being human that are valuable, but there are elements that are not in the positive element, like this picture is. And I think one could call them human values, but I don't know that it's just the range of what values means to you is what
everybody would have their own interpretation. This happens to be what I call things human, things we all can relate to, things we share as human beings.
Okay.
No matter what language we speak, no matter our age, no matter our origin in time, we all share common values that we hold together. And
right.
I simply, it's a label, and that's what I choose. You and I were in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and we were traveling with some locals who were also photographers and our friends, and they took us around to places that the normal tourist would not even know about. It was a small mosque, and there were only 2 people worshiping in it at the time we were there. And it was a backlit scene. And so I chose to abstract it. There's abstraction by shooting two people at prayer in silhouette. And by doing that, and by making the picture black and white as well, what I have done is to create a very contrasty image. Contrasty in terms of light and dark, but also contrasty in terms of meaning. It's a quiet picture, but I feel their heads are full of faith and love and whatever they're concentrating on as they pray. It's a very intense feeling to worship. It's a very private feeling, and it contrasts to the mundane world around them. They've shut out everything. It's an interior world for them, but we see both. We see the light and the dark, and we see them as people, but we also can feel the human value of prayer, of faith, of worship, of peace, calm, quiet. I can keep talking about these things that I feel. Other people might see different things in this image. There's also a sense here of timelessness, because this could be, I could have made this picture 50 years ago, maybe even 100 years ago. And the graininess of the texture suggests an old time photograph, particularly in the shadow area of the curtain, because I was exposing for the bright sunlight across the street. And everything that was backlit went actually black. And so I tried to bring out in my processing in the computer some of the textures in the shadow. And I got that what we would have called grain in the old days. Here it's called noise, but it's good noise.
Mm-hmm. And it's an example of how we as digital photographers and tri-X black and white photographers use all the elements to create an image.
That's right.
In this case, you've included noise, and for me, the noise is a sense of spirit of the inside the mosque. That's what it feels like to me.
And the spirit or spiritualness is a human value, is it not?
Right, agreed. And technically, I love the curve in the wall and the curve of the guy.
You're right.
And also the tension in the separation between the back of the one person, and I think it's probably another man. That that area of just that separation there is really.
Right. We will talk about those at length in my module on photographic composition. But in this case, what we are seeing here, what you mentioned, the curve in the back and the curve in the architecture, is called repetition or rhythmic repetition. And rhythmic repetition can draw the eye into and through the picture and bind the elements within a picture together. And this area here between them, what you called space, is known in the trade as negative space. And people are always looking at what's in the picture, but if you stop to look at the spaces between things and between people, things can happen, such as creating energy or tension. When you bring space and make sure there's no overlap. If this person's profile was overlapping this person's back, the whole picture would fall apart. But
right.
Here, this area generates a great deal of tension. And tension is also a human value, incidentally.
Right, and the curve of the line, continuing the curve of the architecture, goes right down into that space.
Exactly, it leads you down into it.
Right.
And there's a shadow that echoes the architecture in the same way too.
Right.
You and I were in Pingyao, China together, and we were photographing people. And when you photograph people, you're going to always be dealing with human values, because that's what gives these pictures of people their meaning. And I like to feel that photography for me is an exercise in expressing meaning. And I like to feel that expressive photography itself means pictures delivering meaning, telling a story, delivering a message, as opposed to simply recording information.
Right.
I'm not knocking recording. I mean, an X-ray technician makes a very valuable image of someone's broken bone so they can heal it. And that's information. That's informational photography. But I'm talking about expressive photography, conveying an idea that tells a story. And the idea here is pluck or steadfastness or innovation. This woman is using a battered stool as a walker. She's leaning on it. It's her support. And she's carried it from wherever she was out here. Maybe she's even positioning it so she can sit on it. So it becomes her seat.
Right.
And look at her face.
Yeah, move your cursor.
It's a charming face.
Right.
Just absolutely, you fall in love with her. She's almost smiling. Maybe it's kind of a whimsical, well, you're going to make my picture? So whimsy is part of a human value, is part of a story. I was visiting the Great Wall of China back in 2004 on my first visit to China. And I was on the Great Wall, and I noticed behind me these European tourists were having difficulty getting up that very, very steep incline. And when they reached the top, they were ready to grab the wall and hang on. And their guide, who is carrying a bag of their stuff, is walking ahead. He doesn't pay a great deal of attention to what's going on at the moment. There are human values throughout this image. Human values being expressed throughout this image. I mean, the guide expresses his own independence. He does his job his way. I mean, he's doing what they're paying him for, but he doesn't appear, particularly, solicitous of them in their moment of, shall we call it, agony. You can see them both veering off to the side. They're not walking steadfastly ahead. The woman looks like, oh my, why do we do this, George? It tells a story. It expresses ideas. Instead of just another picture of the Great Wall, look for human stories. They're all around us.
Right.
And you and I were on this road trip through, do you remember where this was? It was somewhere out in the West, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It was a road trip on a group of photographers. This woman was the driver of the car that we happened to be in. We were all put in separate cars, and I was sitting in the seat next to her. And it was a snowy day. It was cold, and it was a long day. And she was a very intent driver. And it was the eye. It's the eye that caught my interest. And I waited till she picked up that cup of coffee and planted her nose on the lid and sipped. And the hand, with the tension in the hand.
Right.
You can see her grasping that cup like there's no tomorrow here because it's warm. And still looking straight ahead because she's very careful, and it's a very, very tricky ride. And I made it black and white to carry it even further, to carry the human values even further, because we are not distracted by the colors of what she's wearing or what the cup happened to be, the shade of the cup. You're not seeing it. Tim, do you have anything to add here?
No, the eye and the hand are just, wow. They just have such expression.
Human values can come to us in very small things.
Right.
You don't need a monumental feeling. Little things add up. And you and I, again, were shooting in Singapore. We call this day the Death March. Remember, we were on this island, and we we met up with a group of photographers who all shared galleries on the website PBase, and our visit was set up by one particularly hospitable and intelligent and diligent friend. And she was intent on taking us to this island. And we had to walk around the entire perimeter of the island. It was about 95 degrees and humid and raining and drizzly. And the one picture I came home with was this one, because it was rich and humid. Someone had thrown out a beautifully framed wedding picture, and also a portrait of perhaps the same couple as they looked either before or after their wedding, and a big bag of garbage on top of it, and the dirt oozing out of it. And it was laying there on the side of the road. And I made this image that is rich in loss and memory. It was a picture made in joy, but now seen in sadness. And both joy and sadness are contradictory human values.
Mm-hmm.
Tim, you want to add anything to this?
No, just the fact that it's something I tend to do too, but it's like, look everywhere. In the gutter, in the garbage can.
Yes.
I can remember back in college when when Goldwater and Johnson were running for president, and the day after the election, I opened the garbage closet, and both bumper stickers were in there. I took a picture of it back in the 60s. It's like, look everywhere.
Yes, that's true. Human values are essentially everywhere. Symbols usually represent a human value.
Mm-hmm.
And photography expresses its meanings symbolically, metaphorically. So that's why human values are such a overwhelmingly important leg of expressive photography. I was up in near Portland, Oregon. You have the Columbia River Gorge, and one of the most famous sites is Multnomah Falls. And I didn't shoot the whole falls here. What I did was wait for someone to stop on the old bridge. I say old because it looks like it was designed in the 1910 or 1915 or 1920, that era, about 100 years ago. It's showing its age. Someone stopped there to ponder the majesty of nature. And this picture is full of human values. It's a natural photograph of a phenomenon of nature, water falling hundreds of feet over the edge of a cliff. I mean, it's a spectacle. And yet we look at this man and he's looking at it as if to wonder about the origin of this massively powerful fall. How long has it been here? He's questioning, I feel as if he's questioning his place in the universe here. It's a picture that is full of large meanings, large symbolic meanings. And it's also powerfully symbolic in its contrast, because you have this horizontal bridge bearing the man and this vertical waterfall slicing right through it, right past it, filling it with tension. And I stopped the moment in time, which a camera does.
Mm-hmm.
Tim, you want to add it? Anything to this one?
Awe. It just feels the human value I get from this is awe. Just
yes.
And I think that's not only enhanced by the fall, but the green on
right.
either side.
This picture needs color.
Yeah.
Because it's about nature.
Right.
And you really, to express the beauty of nature, you really need, in this case, to emphasize the richness of nature, the lush green. And it always rains in this area, of course.
Right.
It's one of the wettest parts of our country. And this, Tim, is my final image in this module. I made it in Devil's Island off the coast of, I think, British Guiana in northern South America. And we were on a cruise and we stopped for a day here. This used to be a French penal colony, legendary penal colony. They made many movies were based here. They were shot in Hollywood, but the idea originated here. And I photographed this cell where prisoners were detained for the rest of their lives. And the tourists, the ship's passengers, were walking through them. And this woman stopped to feel a rusting bar. And I caught her at the moment when she seems to be expressing almost physical pain.
Right, agony.
Agony. And that certainly is a human value.
Right.
Freedom or lack thereof is a human value.
Right.
And again, I took out the color to make it even more bleak.
And ghostly.
And again, this is an image that is a frame within a frame. You see the frame around the edge of the picture, and then you see the frame of the window within the picture. And it carries you in, and that's what happens when you are incarcerated. You're put in somewhere, and they let you out maybe for a little walk sometime. And this image is really a very good summation of human values, because it involves symbolic meaning expressed by both human reaction, emotion. Emotions are laced with human values. And that's a good deal of my photography. I shoot pictures of people when they're feeling something, when they're reacting to something. I rarely make a picture of someone just standing there. And in this case, the reaction is profound and the human value expressed is profound. Do you want to add?
Well, again, for me, the ghostliness of it, she could almost be a statue. And I think that may be because in another module, you take a partial picture of a statue in a niche in Cuba.
Right.
But in this case, that evokes history for me. She could be a modern day tourist, but except for the fact of how well she's dressed, she could be a prisoner back in the history of this prison.
I don't think they have incarcerated females, but yes.
I mean, that's my feeling.
And I thought she was dressed almost timelessly. She doesn't particularly look like someone of the 21st century. You know, she could be with that turban. Right. And the covering, the dress she's wearing, you know, it's a timeless picture. And she had no idea that I was making the picture. None. Right. And when she emerged, I showed her the picture. And she looked at it and she said, oh my. She didn't realize how stricken she was feeling at this moment. But that's what the trip was intended to do. Right. They put you in one of the most horrific prisons in history. Right. And so with that, let's wrap it up, and we hope you'll visit all the other modules, and we'll be seeing you again.
Right. Excellent.